Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show on 670 The Score. Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune covering the Bears, and we are ready for the Lions-Bears hype, the look ahead to a big game in Detroit on Sunday. The Bears come off their mini bye. Matt Eberflus was at Haugh Hall on Monday. And Dan, I think that a lot of people want to know what he had to say about Justin Fields. I'm less interested in that. I want to know what you saw from Justin Fields, because you had the videotape. It's on your Twitter feed, and it was pretty telling.
Oh, so compelling video, you know, and it can only be up until about noon on Tuesday. So if you need to rush over to my Twitter page to get your eyes on that, do it now, because it's for a limited time. League rules prohibited staying up longer than 24 hours after it was shot. That said, the Bears held a short practice on Monday at Haugh Hall. It was basically individual drills and then some walkthrough stuff at the end. We were out there for about 10 to 12 minutes. Justin Fields was taking snaps. Justin Fields was working through quarterback drills. Justin Fields looked capable of throwing a football. And so my intuition would be that Justin Fields will be your starting quarterback on Sunday at Ford Field. We know Matt Eberflus is not going to make that proclamation until Wednesday. For whatever reason, he feels like he's getting a competitive advantage by keeping the Lions guessing for an extra 2 days, and his answers to questions today kind of reflected that. But I would be surprised, David. And if we get to Wednesday and they are still non-committal to having Justin Fields as their starting quarterback for this division game against the Lions, then I think we fully unwrap and open the box to whatever guessing game and theories and working guesses that we have for all of it, because it'll be a weird situation at that point.
We'll get to some of the big picture questions and what Justin Fields can prove in the final 7 games later in this pod. But I do think that the longer this goes on, and I do think it's kind of a silly exercise in obfuscation, but I think the longer that goes on, the more it permits some of these kind of silly suggestions that I think are silly, or the assumptions that, well, maybe Justin Fields doesn't want to play, or maybe Justin Fields doesn't want to this or that. I don't think that's a fair assumption, but I'm just talking like we on the Mully and Haugh Show, for an example, you know, our executive producer, Dustin Rhodes, posed that possibility earlier on Monday morning. And I think those kinds of questions are not productive, and I don't think they're fair necessarily, even though I understand why the longer this goes on, people might have them.
The longer it goes on without clear-cut answers from the people that can provide you clear-cut answers, I'm with you. I don't think there's anything there. I think on Wednesday, regardless of what they announce or don't announce, we'll have an opportunity to talk to Justin Fields, because the presumption is he will continue to practice. And once you practice, you are capable of speaking. And so we should hear from him on Wednesday. Like, one of the questions I asked Matt on Monday afternoon was, like, what do you need to see next to get comfortable? Because he kept saying, we're not there yet. And he said he just needs to see him in a football setting, which means, okay, he's going to be practicing for real on Wednesday with a defense that he's going against, a scout team defense, albeit, but they want to see that he's functioning. Well, if they get to the end of that practice and they determine, we don't like what we see, he just doesn't seem comfortable back there, then, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like, this guy is going to be 35 days removed on Sunday at Ford Field from the last time he played a football game. Like, you need to be ready now, and again, you so much of your future hinges on what happens over these next 8 weeks, 7 games. There's a lot for Justin Fields to write in terms of his script. And if you're not ready for that, then we've got bigger problems.
It's been a long month, hasn't it? It's been a long month, 35 days. Wow. That has been a while. So I think that he was only less vague, slightly less vague, I guess, when he's talking about the offensive line, when he was asked about what happens. I think you asked him the question, Dan, about Nate Davis' return and the flexibility, the interchangeability with Cody Whitehair, with Tevin Jenkins, and then with Nate Davis. And how did you interpret his answer?
Yeah, look, like, my educated guess is that when we go back out to Lake Forest on Wednesday, that Nate Davis will participate in practice in some way, shape, or form, whether it's limited or full, whatever. The sprained ankle is something that is going to be tested this week. And if you decide that he is ready to go and resume his place as part of your offensive line, well, now you've got to figure out how you're handling the interior of the line. We've seen Tevin Jenkins flourish beside Darnell Wright. And when you look at kind of a big picture ramifications of those types of things, you're seeing a chemistry develop between two young linemen who are playing very well together on the same side. You may disrupt that because you feel like Tevin going back to the left side and Nate sliding in at the right side gives you a better chance to have the best five across the front. Don't know. Cody Whitehair is a guy who factors into all this. Obviously a mainstay on this offensive line since he got here many, many years ago. And so you've got to work through that as a coaching staff this week. You've got to figure out what makes sense to you, what makes sense for each individual player, and then what makes sense for the quintet. And then one of those guys is probably going to be in a reserve role when they go up to Detroit on Sunday. And so we'll see how it shakes out. But that's certainly significant when you're trying to fortify a line, which, by the way, has a chance to be as solid and healthy as it's been in a long, long time very soon here.
Yeah, I just didn't like the suggestion. I don't think anybody ever really felt comfortable with a rotation at any line position. And even though there's flexibility and guys may feel comfortable here or there, I just think that you want to have 5 guys that you settle on, and you don't really want to get in a rotation for any reason, unless it's injury or conditioning. Like
conditioning, that'd be the only reason I would.
Braxton Jones and Larry Borum. But I just feel like if you go into Detroit, this year, very difficult environment because it's a very good team. It's the best team in your division. You want to have your 5 best on the field as long as possible.
So let me make this proclamation here on November 13th as we record this podcast. I am excited to go to Detroit this weekend, David. I am excited to walk in that building on Sunday morning because I don't know that I've ever been inside Ford Field when there's been significant energy, much less this level of energy for the Lions. I think we're going to be in an environment that is supercharged, which we're not used to. You've been there many times when the Lions are struggling and people are wearing bags on their heads. You know, this is full out onslaught of Lions mania up there. I talked to our good friend Dave Burkett from the Detroit Free Press on Monday, and he said that he estimated that there were 20,000 plus people in LA at SoFi for Lions Chargers, and that this whole season has had this like FOMO vibe for Lions fans who just don't want to miss anything. And so like that place is going to be packed. To your point, it's going to be electric, it's going to be loud, it's going to be supercharged, and there's a really damn good football team waiting for you there.
I just, when you said that, I started to think back to, I can't remember. I think there's not a game that stands out or a season that stands out when maybe they had things rolling and it was pretty hard place to play. Maybe one of the Stafford years. I'm trying to remember what, but Matthew Stafford had a couple seasons where it got a little loud there and he had a very dangerous offense. But I think overall, when you look at their defense and what they're capable of, when you look at the way they play fast and their speed, and Dan Campbell has a lot to do with that, the way he coaches, and I think fast, physical, and violent. I mean, those are things that when you hear him say, you're like, yeah, okay. And I think it does galvanize a fan base. So I'm a little jealous that I'm not going to be at this game because I think it would be a game worth covering.
Yeah, and it looked like it's a measuring stick game for the Bears because, you can take certain positive things and moments of encouragement out of a win over the Panthers on a Thursday night, but you're going to play the division leader. You're going to try to win a division game for the first time in almost 2 calendar years. You are trying to see how you stack up against quality teams in this league and in particular the NFC North. And this is a great opportunity to test it because the Lions are playing with a ton of belief. They're playing with a ton of continuity. They're playing with a ton of energy and they're playing fearless. And that I think is the one thing that Dan Campbell has brought. And we can get into this more later in the week when we're doing our full game preview, but that team is fearless right now. And it's reflected in some of the things they're doing offensively, not only with the production, but the way that they are aggressive in all situations and going for it on 4th down. You see the way that they finished off the Chargers on Sunday by going for it on 4th down one more time and being able to take all the rest of the time off the clock before you kick your game-winning field goal. That team's legit right now. They're for real. And I think the only way that the Lions don't kind of blow the doors open in that game is if they get a little bit bored because it doesn't feel like a great matchup for the Bears. But then again, like this is your chance. Like step up in class, take a challenge with a higher degree of difficulty and show that you belong on that same field.
Win a division game, win a game on the road, win a game against an opponent who has a winning record, which you haven't done the last 15 times that you've played them. I think when you talk about the Lions and the Chargers game, that was fun to follow, even though they didn't show that in the Chicago area. We had to be exposed to Cowboys Giants. But when you look at, that was a battle of the game that punters hate. There were I think the Lions were 3 of 4 in fourth down attempts, and the Chargers were 3 for 3. They were 7 out of 8 combined in fourth down attempts. Both coaches very aggressive and trying to kind of revolutionize the way they go about the job in their respective organizations. And the Lions got the better of them. They scored 41 points, and that's an offense. They scored 41 points against that Charger defense. The Bears did not beat. And I think when you consider that challenge for Matt Eberflus's defense, we're going to find out in a hurry just how legitimate this defense is.
Yeah, and like, you know, so this brings me to another thought, and like Sunday was a unique time for me because I get to sit back, you know, with this mini bye and the Bears playing on Thursday night. I got to watch a lot of other football around the league, and you see certain things, and you're like, I bet you if you took a poll of most people in Chicago and you asked them about Dak Prescott as a quarterback, they'd go, I don't know. If you asked them about Jared Goff as a quarterback, they'd go, I don't know. You would ask them about these guys, and then you watch those guys play football, and they are miles ahead of anything that the Bears have put on the field as a quarterback in the last 5 years. And you're like, okay, well, so like these guys are the level that you're trying to get to before you get to the level that you're trying to get to, you know? And so that's why, you know, it's remarkable to watch that. Jared Goff is playing with a great amount of command right now. He understands how to get the ball to his playmakers. They're a very balanced offense. They got Dave Montgomery. They got Jahmyr Gibbs. They got Amon-Ra St. Brown, the tight end out of Iowa. Sam Laporta is having a great rookie season. There's a lot here to handle if you're Matt Eberflus and his defense, and they better be ready for it.
And that right tackle, Penei Sewell, is a load. He's going to be a force. And then you go on the other side of the ball, Aiden Hutchinson. They are a very good team. And I was wrong about the Lions in the preseason because I felt like they were going to be doing things that Lions teams typically do, but they have yet to disappoint anyone. We'll see how long it lasts, but they're in the right division because the Vikings are resurgent. You wonder how long that fairy tale is going to last for Josh Dobbs. But what Sunday kind of reinforces that I think that when the Lions did what they did against the Chargers, that just says, all right, they benefited from their bye week, and they're going to be a different team down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, look, they were horrible against the Ravens, and that's their one game this year where you're like, okay, that looks like a pretender. Every other game this season, they look for real, you know, and they're playing with, again, a level of confidence that is notable and propels you to potentially think about not only having the shot at the 1 seed in the conference, but the chance to make a little run in January, which is something we never talk about here. I'm going to give Adam Stadzinski, our producer, a little homework assignment here, because the last time I was up at Ford Field was New Year's Day, and I think I blew a gasket because the Bears got their teeth kicked in that day. You remember it really well. They got off to an okay start and then just got their teeth kicked in and basically folded in that game. And I don't know that I've ever been angrier doing a post-game podcast because it was just so disgusting to watch that brand of football against an opponent that was clearly playing a different brand of football, you know? And so I don't know how accessible that clip is, but
I don't know if that's going to be a tough bar to clear. The angriest you've ever been in a post-game podcast. Let's see here.
Okay. We could set a poll, right?
What
we could
game
have a
would
list
that
of
be?
10 or 12. But that's certainly one of them. I mean, sometimes you're just defeated and you're like, the Bears not good enough. But that was just like, it was a disgusting display of football by everyone, by every single person involved. And so they got to go back up there. And one of the reasons I bring that up is because that defense clearly found ways to hem Justin Fields in, you know, and keep him in there and make him try to figure some things out. And then they were able to have great success in shutting down the entire Bears offense once they had him inside there.
You mentioned watching football on Sunday. A couple other takeaways before we get back to the Bears. I think that as it pertains to the Bears, 3 things I think. One, the Jordan Love is every
garbage,
as ordinary as we suspected. The Packers lost, so that was a good thing. That's a big takeaway in Chicago. Number 2, Kyler Murray snuck a game. They stole a victory from the Falcons. He comes back, and he looks like he's going to be able to supply the Cardinals with a little hope down the stretch, and they're going to win some games. And why that matters is because everyone's paying attention to the bottom of the barrel, and the Panthers look like they're a safe bet. Well, a lot of football left, but they look like they're going to be hard-pressed to win more than 3 games. And the other teams in contention, maybe better than that. I don't know about the Giants because they stink out loud. And
poor Tommy DeVito.
Poor Tommy DeVito, the pride of ILLINI. My goodness, he can live at home. I don't even know if his mom would let him back in the house after that disastrous performance against the Cowboys. Didn't even throw for more than 100 yards. Poor guy, the rookie. He is not Tyson Bagent, but the Giants really are bad. So I wonder if it's going to be Panthers, Giants, Patriots, then who?
Maybe the Bears again.
Maybe the Bears again. Maybe the Bears.
I mean, but like, you know, a couple things from me on the Sunday viewing experience. Number one, the bookends of the day were disaster. Colts, Patriots in Germany, like that game was gross. It couldn't get to the noon slate of games fast enough after watching that. I wanted to pour bleach in my eyes and rinse them out. And then we get to the nightcap and you've got Jets Raiders. And oh my God, like I have sat through some abysmal offense in my time on the Bears beat. The Jets they're a mess offensively. They've got some playmakers like Garrett Wilson playing in a functional offense could have had 270 yards, you know, in a game, and they just can't get anything done. So you watch these and you're like, oh God. But then again, in that middle tier, there's these games where you're like, there's all these maybe they're okay good teams, and the Bears are still behind them. And one of those teams, which I wanted to get your take on, is the Minnesota Vikings, who walked into Soldier Field at 1-4 with their best player headed for injured reserve, and somehow haven't lost since, despite their starting quarterback also tearing his Achilles.
I think the Vikings are a great story. I think they're very well coached, and you can see the evidence of an offensive scheme really making a difference, and maybe grasping the obvious. And maybe, again, it's easy to say this from afar to oversimplify, but what Kevin O'Connell has done was in some way he has streamlined the offense so Josh Dobbs can learn it quickly and also accentuate his strengths. He's a mobile quarterback. He's not afraid to mix in routes, and they have good skill. They have good skill beyond Justin Jefferson. You look at the rookie Jordan Addison. He's been tremendous. They use their tight end very well, and he's a weapon. And they use the passing games kind of to complement the running game. And their defense has been good enough. And they have some guys who are disruptive there. Daniil Hunter, Murphy is kind of hit or miss. He plays, he gets beat a lot, I think, but he also makes some plays on the ball. But I think that's almost like, it's hard to look at the Vikings and not think that, boy, that they're a product of coaching as much as they are of talent. And they have gotten most out of that roster.
There's no argument to be made otherwise. It's incredible that they're on a 5-game surge. The Bears haven't won consecutive games since 2021. This team loses the best receiver in football and their starting quarterback in a span of like 22 days. And they're on a 5-game heater right in the thick of the NFC wildcard race. And you could make the argument that the two coaches at the top of the NFC North right now are front runners for Coach of the Year with Dan Campbell and Kevin O'Connell.
I would think that's true. The thing that really bothers you from a Bears perspective is that Kevin O'Connell was a guy that started the same season Matt Eberflus did.
Sure
Mike
did.
McDaniel started the same season Matt Eberflus did. D'Amico Ryans down in Houston, defensive-minded head coach, and he's getting the most out of a young quarterback because he hired the right offensive coordinator. When you see these things around the league and you take a step back, yeah, you could really get frustrated, even though the Bears are coming off a victory. You start to look at what other teams are doing, and you're like, why can't that happen here in Chicago? Because that's the frustration that you feel when you watch some of these teams play.
Most notable member of the Houston Texans offensive coaching staff right now? Bill Lazor.
Wow. Wait a second. Repeat that. Bill Lazor's playing a big role in the Houston Texans.
I'm not saying a big role, but he's part of the offensive coaching staff there as a helper on that staff. And so, that obviously Bobby Slowick, the coordinator there, is doing a wonderful job with CJ Stroud. And my God, like CJ Stroud is the outlier by a million miles right now in terms of a rookie quarterback who got on the runway and has launched himself to stardom.
In your world, did the Panthers miss on CJ Stroud or did the Bears?
Yeah, everyone. You're right. I mean, like, you know what I mean?
Like, but not everyone had the number 1 overall pick, Dan.
That's what I mean. No, I know. But I mean, everyone in those two answers that you told me about right there, because, I look like I got in an argument with a diehard Bears fan of mine, loyal listener of the Take the North podcast, about how much we should put into the conversation, just even the conversation about did the Bears miss on CJ Stroud? Because he said, nobody was ever really talking about CJ Stroud as a realistic option for the Bears. I said, well, wait a second. He was widely regarded as one of the top 2, if not, the best or certainly top 3 quarterbacks in a draft class where you had the number 1 pick. Certainly the Bears' evaluation of who he was as a quarterback is relevant, and I certainly would like to learn more about what they weren't sold on with C.J. Stroud. Obviously, we documented the reasons that it made sense to stay the course and see it through with Justin Fields, but this was a decision that we talked about multiple times in the spring was going to be defining based on how these guys' pro careers played out.
I suddenly want to as well, because C.J. Stroud is one of 3 quarterbacks who, quote, didn't blow Ryan Poles away. He wasn't blown away.
It's not like he was a 5th-round guy, I mean, he was at the top of the draft board.
He was evaluated as one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the draft. I mean, Carolina, there were rumors because he was going to go there because Josh McCown winked at him a certain way or whatever. I don't know why C.J. Stroud didn't come out of left field. Here's a question that I asked this morning on Monday morning on Mully and Haugh. I wonder if the evaluation or the relative success or lack of success from Justin Fields and the Ohio State quarterback, if it affected the evaluation of C.J. Stroud, in that people would stay away because, at Ohio State, you have every built-in advantage. You have an offensive line that's going to protect you. You got an NFL wide receiving core, and you have poor competition. And I don't know that you always get a true evaluation of who a quarterback can be. And maybe that factored into some people staying away from C.J. Stroud because, oh, look, we were wrong about Justin Fields. He's struggling. Might be wrong about this kid too because he has the same advantages at Ohio State.
But again, when we walked out of Soldier Field in Week 18 last year, and everything was, there was another parade in Chicago because they got the number 1 pick, and the Texans and Lovey, they pooped down their leg and they won a game that they shouldn't have won, and they were going to do massive harm to the franchise. And the counter argument was, well, let's see. Well, guess what? The Houston Texans might be playing in the postseason with their quarterback position and their head coaching position seemingly firmly solidified already. Now, look, this is the NFL. Things go haywire in a hurry. We could be having a totally different discussion a year from now. But that certainly seems like the dream scenario of getting it right at 2 of the most important positions in the building and being able to kind of reap the rewards of that for as long as you can imagine.
And they were a train wreck of an organization. And then they get it right. And C.J. Stroud, he out-burrowed Joe Burrow. I mean, he was better than Joe Cool. And now he's got, 15 touchdowns and 2 interceptions? It's absurd how well
I know he went into the weekend, even before the game on Sunday, with more passing yards in his first 8 games as a pro than Justin Fields had in his entire second season.
Okay, we need to get off this. It's going to get triggered, and we'll have to have another sort of have another sort of podcast like that. We're being very calm today. All right, so in between watching the games, we had plenty of time to read the Chicago Tribune Sunday edition. And whether it's online or in print, you took some real good hard looks at some big picture questions, which I think would be interesting to revisit here for people who did not get the paper. But I would encourage everyone to get the paper, or at least go to chicagotribune.com and check it out. There might be a paywall, but pay up, guys. Come on. You have to pay for journalism these days, especially good stuff. All right, Dan, so what do you think about overall?
This will be a good exercise for the both of us to kind of sound through, but I took a look at 5 big picture questions that the Bears had to answer down the stretch of this season. I'm going to ask them each to you, and we can kind of sound out each one of them as we go through this. And the first one is, what's next for Justin Fields? And the first part of that question is basically in week 11. What's next for Justin Fields this week? Keep your answer confined to between now and Sunday at 4:00 Detroit time.
Yeah, I think what's next for Justin Fields is to show that he can operate the offense as well as the guy who replaced him. I think that you need to see some growth in terms of him processing information at the line of scrimmage quickly, in the pocket quickly. I think you want to see improvement in accuracy. You want him to take some shots down the field. And then you want to return to the explosiveness that we saw during a 6-game stretch last year after that mini bye. After this mini bye, it's an opportunity for Justin Fields to go out and to remind us what special looks like.
All right. I'm not going to disagree with anything you said there. And the second part of the question number 2 is, okay, but what is really next for Justin Fields? And that's more the big picture lens on, like, what does this mean? What is the significance of this 7-game stretch for the Bears organization, which is going to have huge decisions to make in the offseason, for Justin himself, whose career is kind of at this pivot point? What does this next 2 months really mean for Justin Fields?
We just got done going on a little bit of a rant, if you will, or description about C.J. Stroud and what he was able to accomplish in 9 games. After about 6, people were going on a similar diatribe describing what he did well. It doesn't take long in the NFL. You're 3 games away from crisis or carnival, as Foxy used to say. Justin Fields has 7 games. He can be that guy and have that kind of season. What's really next for Justin Fields? An opportunity to take advantage of if he wants to change people's minds. And right now, it's an uphill battle in Chicago, not only for fans and media, but I think maybe in his front office. If he really wants to change people's minds, he's not going to have to just play the role and the position. He's got to be exceptional. He's got to have a CJ Stroud-like second half. Can he do it? I doubt it, but that's the answer to the question. What can he do? He can change people's minds by being outstanding.
Yeah, and in playing winning football, I hope he doesn't feel the pressure to take, what we already said was going to be at least a 35-day layoff if he does return on Sunday at Ford Field, and feel the urge to make up for it all at once. Just play good, solid, winning football. Put your team in position to win a game, and then when it's a close game in the fourth quarter, go win one for once. Take control of this story. You've got the steering wheel. Drive it down the road that you think we should be down, and continue to do that for 7 games through the end of the season. The durability thing is obviously an issue. I was asked by Dan Bernstein and Lawrence Holmes on Monday afternoon whether the spasm of Bagent mania is over. And I said, there might be another spasm waiting, because I don't know if Justin's going to play 7 consecutive games to end the year. We have seen 44 Bears games played since the Bears drafted Justin Fields. He's missed 11 of them. Okay, that's a quarter. You can do that math quickly. I know that Ball State degree hangs up in that office for a reason, because you can do percentages. 25% of the games have been missed, and he's only won 6 times. So, let's reverse some of these numbers that we talk about. You and I were the originators of the No Excuses Tour, and yet there are people now saying, okay, now it really sets up to be the No Excuses Tour. Okay, why are we having so much trouble getting this tour bus out of the loading docks here? Let's go. No more excuses. Play well and make something happen.
Yeah, I think it's well put. I mean, this tour's not going so well. I gotta say,
no, a lot of excuses.
Plenty of excuses and plenty of seats available. So, all right, what's the third point?
A couple more questions. Matt Eberflus. He's obviously been a hot topic of conversation. 3-7 this season. We know it was 3-14 a year ago. What do you think should be at the center of his performance review when Kevin Warren and presumably Ryan Poles sit down on the Monday of Week 19 and figure it out?
I think that's a great question. I think it's pretty open-ended. I'll try to be succinct. I think when you're talking about coaches and evaluating coaches, you do evaluate them by the records, which isn't going to speak well for Matt Eberflus. I also think that in the room, in those settings, you know it when you see it and when you hear it. And I just don't know if that's going to be in his favor. I think Kevin Warren's going to want to be wowed. If he sits down and he's in the room with Ryan Poles, I don't think that Ryan Poles is going to be evaluating Matt Eberflus as much as maybe Kevin Warren is going to be evaluating Matt Eberflus, or Kevin Warren evaluating Ryan Poles evaluating Matt Eberflus. You've got to dazzle him. You've got to have a clear plan, a simple, strong message. And I don't know that he's capable of doing that. Quickly, Dan, on Monday morning, went to Wrigley Field, or Clark and Addison, the Cubs complex, and I was sitting in the room when Craig Counsell took over as manager of the Cubs. They poached him from the Brewers. It was a great Cubby coup of 2023. Craig Counsell understands clear, strong messaging and communication. He is that kind of a guy. You know it when you see it, and we heard it from Craig Counsell. It could not help but contrast that when I got in the car and I'm listening to Matt Eberflus at the podium. And I'm not trying to be unfair to him, but I'm just telling you my point of reference here. Then I hear Matt Eberflus do what he so often does, too often does. He muddled the message, and he didn't have a clear plan, even for that day. The great coaches have a plan for every hour and every quarter hour of every day. I just don't know that he has that, and I think it's reflected in his team. Somehow there's a lack of talent, and there's not a great amount of direction. So I think that it's an uphill battle for Matt Eberflus.
A couple quick footnotes on that conversation. His winning percentage is .222. It's the worst of any Bears coach all time. We know that there have only been One coach, only been one coach in Bears history that in the Super Bowl era that hasn't made it to a second season. That was Mark Trestman, and Mark Trestman only. I was more surprised to learn that over the past 30 years, there have been 57 NFL head coaches that haven't made it to a third season, including 15 who have either coached for the Browns or the Raiders, which is a trap door when you walk into one of those buildings. So that surprised me. And then the other number I wanted to give you is that Matt Eberflus's defenses have a takeaway total through 27 games of 32. That's more than a season and a half of football. They've got 32 takeaways. That is the T in the hits principle. Lovie Smith's teams over 9 years averaged 34 takeaways per season. So you see like the difference between what you said you were going to do and what somebody who already has done it accomplished with their defense. I thought that was a notable note as well.
When you underdeliver on that promise, yes, it makes it easier to fire him, and especially when you consider you do have a new president who I think is going to be more impactful in these offseason decisions than maybe people anticipate.
Also 2-10 in one-score games, and those wins were over the Texans a year ago and the Panthers this year. So not
they're
exactly.
0-15 against the last 15 opponents with winning records.
Ugly.
I don't think we need. I don't think it's a lot. I don't think it's a long closing argument.
All right, question 4 for you: has the Bears defense made a significant breakthrough recently? I'm curious what you think of that.
I would say yes. I think the significant breakthrough for me, and maybe it's all about expectations, but they're stopping the run at a higher rate than I ever anticipated. Andrew Billings is doing the job, and I think Montez Sweat's addition has helped the pass rush, maybe not cured everything. You get the secondary healthy, and I do think at times, dare I say, if the secondary plays at a very high level, and the run defense statistically is playing at a very high level. It's odd that I think the secondary flashes on tape more than the run defense, but I think they're probably easier to watch. Linebackers have been solid. TJ Edwards in against the run, and Jack Sanborn. Tremaine Edmonds has been injured and out, so maybe it's not fair to fully evaluate him. But I do think they probably have had a significant breakthrough. And if you're looking at something about this season that Matt Eberflus could lay a claim to and say, hey, look at this, it would be the improvement of the defense.
I mean, look, like I'm right there. There's statistical evidence to tell you that this team has been playing better, that they're keeping the Bears in games much better than they did in 2022. This defense seems to be moving in the right direction. But again, like this comes down to how many game-changing plays can you make? So those sacks and those takeaways have to come here. You know, if you've made the breakthrough, the next step is to make the next breakthrough, which is the sacks and the takeaways. We'll see if the Bears can get there. And as we've mentioned, the Detroit Lions, 2 of the Bears' next 3 games are against the Lions, and they are shredding everybody. So if you can stand up and hold your own against this Lions team twice in the next 4 weeks, then we can talk about an even bigger breakthrough there. All right, last question. We talked about Justin Fields. We talked about Matt Eberflus. Who in your mind has the most to prove besides those 2 gentlemen down the stretch of the season?
Oh, I really like that question. The most to prove besides Justin Fields and Matt Eberflus. I would say if it's player or coach, I'll give you one coach and one player. The coach is Luke Getsy. The coach is Luke Getsy, who built up all the goodwill in season 1 to the point where we had the comical short conversation in town among some people about, oh, what are we going to do when Luke Getsy's a head coach? Can you really afford to let him go? Oh, gosh. Do you remember those days?
I do.
Anyway, I think he's got the most to prove because of his tendency to get too cute and try to outsmart everybody when you don't need to. He needs to take the simple plays and take advantage of those. I think Luke Getsy has the most to prove over the last 7 games, and maybe the most to gain as well. As a player, I really think that Jalen Johnson can take a step forward to continue to maybe progress. He needs more interceptions in the final 7 games. There's going to be a big contract negotiation, maybe a big decision by the front office, and he wants to put himself in the best possible light. As an individual, there's not really anyone else skill-wise that I think could gain as much as Jalen Johnson could over the final 7 games. So I'd say it'd be Jalen Johnson.
Jalen is definitely on my short list, as well as his 2020 draft classmate, Darnell Mooney, who's in the final stretch of his rookie contract as well, and obviously wants to establish himself as a guy that should get paid next spring by someone, somewhere. I think Montez Sweat, as you and I have talked about previously, has a lot to prove, even though he already has his deal and his money safely secured and whatever bank he uses to safely secure it. He's got to prove that he is the star that the Bears believe him to be, that he is the multiplier that is going to take this defense to the next level. that pressure is on him now. And so he has to live up to that and handle it the right way. We'll see if he can do that. And then I would talk about Tevin Jenkins a little bit as a guy who obviously, when healthy, and particularly this year, shows flashes of being a guy that you want to believe in. You want to say this guy should be a part of our future, and yet the durability has been such a problem for his entire time in the league that now this stretch of, I think it's 6 straight games that he's played without a setback, you're going, okay, can we get that up to 13 by the end of the year, and then start thinking about really, really locking you down as somebody that should be a part of this offensive line for years to come, because you and I both know every time you've got to replace someone that you thought was going to be that guy for whatever reason, you're just setting back the progress of your rebuild or your resurgence or whatever you want to call it, your return to relevance, more than you need to set it back. And so if they could have a healthy, productive Tevin Jenkins and say, yeah, that whatever happened in Indy that caused that 4-game stint on IR is in the rear view, and we've got a whole different guy to evaluate going forward, that would be huge for this organization.
That's a good one. Those are good questions. That was a productive thing. I think you covered a lot of ground. That's what made it easy to read on Sunday in the Chicago Tribune and chicagotribune.com. Go ahead and subscribe, people. Anything else, Dan, before we get out of here?
No, like I say, I'm really looking forward to this week in Detroit. It's going to be an interesting one with the Lions. We'll preview the game a little bit more later in the week, and hopefully we'll have more answers about the quarterback situation from the quarterback himself later in this week. I think it'll be interesting to get hopefully a longer session with Justin to find out what his life's been like over the last 35 days.
That'd be great. Look forward to that. Also, a shout out, Brady Hoke, San Diego State coach, retiring today. The announcement came on Monday. Brady Hoke, former Ball State football player before my time, but he is also the brother of John Hoke, the Bears secondary coach. Brady was a very successful coach at Ball State, went on to Michigan, had some mixed results there, ended up at San Diego State, but really a football guy, really good coach, great guy. Congratulations to Brady Hoke. Job well done, career well spent, and hope you enjoy your retirement. So shout out to Brady Hoke.
There you go.
All right, and we'll be back on Friday morning when we have our predictions, when we talk about the Lions, the team that is fast, physical, and violent. I think I know which way our predictions will be going, but we'll break it down. Hopefully we'll have some more clarity on the quarterback situation and everything else. So thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast on the free Odyssey app and wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch us on the 670 Scores YouTube page. For Adam Sadzinski, Dan Wiederer, I'm David Haugh. We'll talk to you next time on the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.